Welcome to the Wolverine Confidential Podcast. I am Andrew Kahn.
I'm Ryan Zook.
And I'm Aaron McMahon.
It's game week in Ann Arbor as the Michigan football team readies for its season opener against New Mexico. How will freshman Bryce Underwood fare in his college debut? What should we expect from Michigan on Saturday and beyond? We discuss coming up on Wolverine Confidential. All right, guys, good to be with you here on Wednesday morning, August 27th. Just a few days away from Michigan's season opener at home against New Mexico. Kickoff is set for 7:36 p.m. and it will air on NBC. Long off season of some NCAA sanctions that took 2 years that you guys hit on in last week's episode. A lot of talk about new players on the roster, whether they be freshmen or transfers. Second year for head coach Sharon Moore, who's got some new members on his staff. But here we are, game week. This is kind of what you live for if you're a fan, if you're covering the team, if you're playing on the team, the actual competition, and now it's just a few days away.
Yeah, finally. All the speculation, all the trying to figuring out who's going to be quarterback, who's starting, what Michigan's offense is going to look like. We're gonna get some answers on Saturday. Competition isn't great as it isn't normally week one, but at least you get to see tangible football being played that's going to count on Michigan's record. And we're going to it's the first data point, right, in 12 data points of how this Wolverines football team is going to look in 2025. So I'm looking forward to it. Football, meaningful football is here. It's the first leg here in Michigan's chase to try to get back in the top, the top of the Big Ten, the top of college football, and we'll see how they fare.
Yeah, it is exciting because it seems like at this point in camp every year, it seems like both sides of the ball have 20 preseason All-Americans on them, but only 11 guys can be on the field at the same time. So it'll be good to actually see who has made the biggest improvements, how roles have changed since last season. Just to see and just the Bryce Underwood factor too. So there's a lot of things that we'll be watching for on Saturday, even if the opponent isn't great.
Yeah, so that we could talk about the news that we've learned, this week leading up to the game, talking to players and coaches. The number one item, obviously, is Sharon Moore naming the starting quarterback. He gave an opening statement on Monday, kind of just about his, what he thought of fall camp and his excitement for the season. Then he paused for a second, he smiled, and he's just like, you want me to just answer it? Like, he knew what the first question was going to be. So he's like, yeah, Bryce Underwood is the starting quarterback. I think Aaron in one of his stories said, the worst kept secret in Ann Arbor is now official. So yeah, we had discussed this on this podcast, kind of knew it was coming, but now it's official. The freshman, number one overall recruit in the country, will start the season opener for Michigan, Bryce Underwood.
Yeah, I mean, look, it'd been trending this way, and we'd been talking about it for several weeks now. Once they got into camp and it became clear that Mikey Keene, who was looked at as kind of, the real kind of competitor to Bryce Underwood, was still limited and still not going through practices in full. It became obvious to me that Bryce was going to be the guy. And you can make the case coming out of spring, too, that Michigan clearly viewed Bryce as their number one guy, and they wanted to see how camp would go. And by all accounts, based on what Sharon told us and what we've been hearing from players, Underwood's, sees the moment away. Yes, he is young. Yes, he just turned 18 years old last week, and he's going to make mistakes. And it's something that Sharon's kind of, trying to warm people up to the idea of, look, he's not going to be perfect. It's going to take some time, but it sounds like Michigan is committed to him, and they're going to ride this out. We're going to see how things go. Bryce is, he's as confident as they come. He spoke to the Big Ten Network last week, actually before Michigan made the announcement, and he was eager to play. I think he's eager to show what he can do. I think a lot of fans are looking forward to what he can do, and certainly us in the media are looking forward to it too, because we just haven't been able to see practice, and we have to go off what we're told and what we're hearing. And a lot of times that can kind of cloud your vision a little bit, cloud maybe what you think as I said earlier, week one, this Saturday will be the first data point in the Bryce Underwood era. We're going to find out what he's made of.
Yeah, that's the thing. I get asked by a lot of people, oh, how's he look? Is he the real deal? All this stuff. And again, we're not allowed into practice to watch any of this. So anything we get is secondhand, just by definition. And yeah, I think naturally sometimes that's going to lead more towards, the positive end of the spectrum, than being critical of what a guy's doing. But I mean, there's no doubting it. I mean, let's just look at what the New Mexico coach said yesterday in his press conference. Michigan's paying him all that money for a reason. He's the number one recruit in the country for a reason. So like those, those things alone, like that the talent is clearly there. And there's a lot more excitement, I think, going into this opener with Underwood as the quarterback than if anyone else had been named that job.
And not to downplay this because Bryce he's a extraordinary talent. I think Michigan saw that early on. There's a reason he was a 5-star recruit. There's a reason he was number one rated, player in the country coming out of high school. But as I said earlier, there weren't a ton of other options here. Mikey Keene, by and large, was unavailable. Jake Garcia, the kind of veteran that in the group, came in mid-June, hasn't been able to, he's still learning the playbook, still grasping the offense, learning to play with his teammates. So there weren't a whole lot of other options here. Jaden Davis is going to be the number 2 backup on Saturday, which is interesting because we just didn't see a lot of him last year, even when Michigan was going through the quarterback struggles. That Michigan elected not to play him, so that you can read into that what you may. But as things stand right now, going to week 1, it's going to be Bryce Underwood as a starter and Jane Davis as the number 2, and then we'll see where things go after that. But Bryce, from a ceiling perspective, not only does he elevate, does he elevate the floor of the Michigan quarterback room, and I think just by default they're going to be better than they were last year. But the ceiling is so, I think, high that Michigan has there's no excuse not to try him at this point, given the situation in the quarterback room. So they're going to find out what they got here. Or, some guys practice very well and don't hold up in games. Some guys practice okay, but excel in big moments and big games. Like maybe like Cade McNamara a couple years ago. We're going to find out where Bryce Underwood falls in that. But right now, Michigan clearly feels like there's enough there, and he's ready. He's ready for the moment, and we're going to see on Saturday night.
And I do think it's important too to temper expectations. And even Sharon said this on Monday too. It's like there's going to be growing pains. Like he's a young kid. He's going to make mistakes. It's just you got to continue to build off those, and I think they want to see improvement throughout the year. And I think even if he has a perfect passer rating on Saturday and throws for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns, like you can't overreact to that too, because the competition is going to get tougher. Week 2 against Oklahoma is going to be the true test, but it's so rare for a true freshman, 18-year-old kid, someone who just turned 18, to step in and just light the college football world on fire too. And so much of it too is who's around him, and there's still question marks around him too. So it's exciting, and he like Aaron said, he's got all the talent in the world. His size, he's got a strong arm, he's got it all. But being able to put it together on the field on game days typically takes some time. So we'll see. It's going to be a fascinating story to watch all season.
Published just yesterday on MLive.com/Wolverines under the headline Bryce Underwood, goals, expectations for Michigan QB in 2025. The three of us took a crack at predictions for Underwood and the Michigan quarterback room. And one of the questions was, where will he finish, in Big Ten, in passing yards among Big Ten quarterbacks this season. And, I predicted 6th. And I think I was the most optimistic. Ryan at 7th, and then Aaron said middle of the pack, and it's an 18-team league, so somewhere there or a little worse. So yeah, that alone kind of speaks to, all right, yeah, maybe he's not going to win. He said he wanted to win a couple of Heisman trophies or whatever. Maybe one of those isn't coming in his freshman season.
No, and I think part of that's by default, right? By the way the Michigan offense wants to operate. They're still going to want to run the football. They're still going to want to get the running backs involved and play that smash physical style that Sherrone Moore and Jim Harbaugh did, just a few years ago. So part of that, they're going to, I don't say baby him along, but they're going to, I think, slow roll this a little bit, right? You don't want to put him in a situation where he has a game where he throws 2 or 3 interceptions and he potentially loses confidence or struggles continue. So I think they're going to bring him along slowly. Look, Chip Lindsey is a veteran coordinator. He knows how to bring quarterbacks along. He knows how to develop them. He knows how to put them in the right situation. So I don't think you're going to see Michigan come out Saturday slinging the ball around, going deep all the time. You're not going to see a drastic change in what they fundamentally wanted to do last year. I think what they're going to do is put Bryce in situations where they think he can excel, and they're going to maximize those opportunities, and that's where the stats are going to come in for Bryce Underwood. Whereas last year, you had Davis Warren, Alex Orji, et cetera, they just couldn't complete a lot of those throws. Whereas the difference this year is Bryce can, and he's theoretically got more experience and better weapons around him. So, in terms of the run pass differential, don't expect it to change much. I still think Michigan's going to try and run the football a lot this year. But when they do throw the football, I think that's where you're going to see the drastic difference. And I think that's where Michigan's offense has the potential to show some serious improvement in Big Ten play this year.
Yes, I will say this: when they throw the ball for the first time on Saturday, I just can't wait to see the reaction, the crowd. I mean, there's just going to be so much excitement. If he completes it, I don't care if it's 3 or 4 yards, just because of unfortunately what you saw from that quarterback room last year is going to be quite the reaction I expect.
Watch it be like a little shovel pass with like a receiver in motion before pre-snap, and he just shovels it to him right on like an end around. And it goes for a touchdown.
There you go. All right, let's get into some other things we learned maybe outside of Bryce Underwood. Then quickly hit on New Mexico before we get into later in this episode, our predictions for the entire season for Michigan. But yeah, outside of Underwood, obviously Sharon Moore had a lot to say here leading up to game week. No depth chart still for Michigan, and New Mexico, kind of poked fun at that. But yeah, what else stood out to you about what we've learned so far this week?
Yeah, Michigan hasn't put out a depth chart, but we will on Friday, and we've got a good idea of where things stand. Two surprises, I thought, from Monday's press conference with Sharon Moore on the offensive side of the ball. Two names where you knew they were in the mix, but you weren't sure if they were going to get, where they stood. And we got a better feel of that. We'll start with the offensive line. Brady Norton, the transfer from Cal Poly, FCS school. He was an undersized tackle coming in, and I think the assumption at that point was he was going to have to put on weight and compete at tackle. Yes, he's put on weight. In fact, I think he's put on almost 30 pounds since he got here in January. But he's also moved spots. He's moved inside. He was working it sounds like all three positions: tackle, guard, and center during the offseason. He's gonna start at right guard. A little bit of a surprise to me. Nathan Afobe, the redshirt junior, had been kind of discussed there throughout. He played a little bit last year. His name had been mentioned as a front runner for most of the offseason. But Michigan's made the decision to start Norton. He's an interesting dude, long, tall. He was lanky when he got here. It sounds like, as I said, he's put on some weight, so they feel relatively comfortable with him there. It sounds like Afobe will still see some playing time. Wouldn't surprise me if the reps are kind of shared, given the work that Afobe's put in. But Norton will get the start of the offensive line. Other than that, the offensive line's relatively set. We knew that, going into the year. Andrew Babalola, the true freshman tackle who was pushing for a starting job, is obviously out for the year, which opened things up for Evan Link. Giovanni Ohadi will start left guard. Greg Crippen, the returning center, is back. And I mentioned Norton at right guard, and then right tackle is redshirt freshman Andrew Sprague. So the other surprise, to me at least, was Channing Goodwin's name come up at receiver. We knew Donovan McCulley is going to be their number one option. He's going to be their top guy on the outside. Samaj Morgan's back as well. It sounds like Channing Goodwin is kind of dethroned Fred Moore for that third receiver spot. Now, I don't know how much or how often Michigan's going to use three receiver sets. With Chip Lindsey, I tend to think they'll do it a little bit more, but either way, Goodwin is going to be more of a factor this year. He didn't play much last year, played in 4 games. In fact, didn't have a single catch, but apparently he's done enough in the offseason to warrant moving up in the depth chart. So read into that what you want. Either Goodwin has made a leap here, or Michigan's depth at receiver still is an issue. So those are the two big surprises to me on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think it's probably more of the latter too, because we've talked about how many guys that are in that room and Michigan wanting to see leaps from, and if Channing Goodwin's kind of already leaped them on the depth chart, maybe not a good sign. But again, it's hard to tell until we see game action. But as far as on one receiver should be seeing some more playing time, at least on special teams. And Sharon mentioned that Andrew Marsh is going to be the primary kick returner too, the highly regarded freshman wideout from Texas. So it seems like they like his skill set, want to get the ball in his hands. I don't know what that means for how much he's going to play on offense right away, but the fact that they're going to put him back there to return kicks right away just shows at least his dynamic ability. And then defensively too, I thought one. We pretty much knew most of the starters, but As far as the secondary goes, it does sound like there's going to be some mixing and matching, but Sharon did say Jair Hill has cemented himself is the number one cornerback. We've talked about him in the past about having an up and down sophomore year last year. Lost had his number 20 stripped away. It seemed like the coaches needed to see a lot of growing up from him on and off the field. And it sounds like he's had a good camp. But behind him, we thought, oh, Zeke Berry for sure, the number two. But it sounds like Sharon Moore said some younger guys are pushing him too, with Shamari Earls, a true freshman. Elijah Dotson moved a corner, also true freshman, and Jaden Sanders, a true freshman as well, along with sophomore Josiah Edmond. So it'll be interesting to see what the secondary looks like, because it does sound like Wink Martindale wants to mix it up a lot. And we know inside on the defensive line too, and even at the edge positions, there's going to be a lot of rotation because the team is extremely deep up front.
On that note, Wink Martindale's made some interesting comments this offseason about the talent in the secondary. And he's also made some comments about the young guys needing to grow up. So I do think they view some of those young guys, those freshmen and sophomores that you just mentioned, Ryan, as potential future stars. And I do think they're going to try and get them into games, or especially early in the year here against maybe lesser competition. So the secondary to me on the defensive side of the ball is probably the most fascinating because they've got this interesting blend of experienced and talent and youth that and I think it intrigues Wink Martindale. I think he's going to get a lot of those guys into games, and you're going to see some guys play and do some different things. We heard all off season about Michigan's positionless defense, and I think it's setting the Wolverines up to throw some different looks and Wink Martindale kind of do some different things within the scheme this fall. So I'm curious to see what they say because what we see, because we've heard about Jay Barr on the inside linebacker potentially coming off the edge at times. We've heard about Mason Curtis, the safety, potentially dropping down and playing some outside linebacker or some nickel. They're going to move some guys around, and I think try to give opposing offenses fits, just from a schematic perspective. I think this year is really going to be what I think Wink Martindale wants the defense to look like. Last year, I think was a little bit of an adjustment period for him and the personnel, and I think he feels better about what he has this year, and he likes what he has this year more than he did last year. And I'm curious to see where this defense goes. I'm on record as saying this potentially could be a better unit than it was last year, despite not having those first round picks. And I think he's got a collection of guys he feels really good about. Now it's about figuring out where he can get the most out of them.
All right, so yes, Michigan will see a lot of these guys on the field Saturday night at the Big House against New Mexico. I don't know how much time you guys want to spend on the Lobos. Michigan's a 35-point favorite in this game, but we'll bring you up to speed a little bit on them at least. I mean, it's a revamp roster with a new coach. Jason Eck, who had spent the previous 3 years at an FCS program. Idaho did well there, finished in the top 10, of the national rankings twice. But he came in and replaced Bronco Mendenhall, a name that, college football fans might be familiar with. But he spent just one season there in Albuquerque before leaving for Utah State. And as a result, in the transfer portal era with the coaching change, kind of had to completely rebuild the roster, brought a lot of players over from Idaho, not as many as, Curt Cignetti did at Indiana, coming over from James Madison. But still, I think there were maybe 9 or 10 guys, including his son, a linebacker who, was a star at Idaho, brought his quarterback with him, who was, pretty successful when healthy, his offensive coordinator as well. So, there should be some familiarity there, at least on the offensive side. Brought in a whole bunch of transfers, to try to build up this team and try to get the program rebooted.
I read some of his comments. He said earlier this week, and Andrew, you have a story about it at MLive.com/Wolverines, but I found it really fascinating. It sounds like they're kind of coming in, preparing. They're going to kind of throw caution at the wind. They're going to see what they can do. And he even said it, right? We've got nothing to lose. So I'm curious to see how they look coming out. I think we'll figure out early on, maybe that first or second drive, if they can sustain anything or get anything done. And that'll probably determine which way this goes, right? Whether it's a relatively close game or in Michigan's, fitting to blow them out. I tend to lean toward the latter, with given the point spread, Michigan's defense. But again, as we talked about earlier with Bryce Underwood and some of the young pieces on offense, we don't know how that's going to look. So I don't know. Not an ideal scenario for him in his first game at a new school, going into the big house and playing Michigan. But we've seen before big upsets happen. So never say never.
They're going to find out really quick that Big Ten football ain't FCS. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, he was very open about everything. I mean, I found his press conference to be very fascinating watching it. But he basically said, yeah, there's not really many one-on-one matchups that we would have the advantage in. So, going to try to scheme some stuff up where we could get one of our best players on one of their worst, and kind of hope for the best from there. So, yeah, that's typically the case when you have a Michigan against a team like this. So. We will see. It's a first ever meeting between these two schools. I don't know if people saw they did a uniform reveal that they're bringing these turquoise uniforms to the program this season. They will not be wearing those on Saturday. Michigan is wearing their dark blue tops as far as I know, and it wouldn't work with that. I know sometimes the night games they might do the maze out or whatever. They're not doing that as far as I know, but even if they did, that wouldn't really work against turquoise. There are rules about how close the colors could be, of course, in the opposite team. So won't be seeing those on Saturday night, but yeah, it'll be it's good for Michigan, I guess, to just kind of ease into this season to a certain extent, because it gets very real the next week at Oklahoma. And I think that's a perfect spot to try to transition to our season predictions and where we think this Michigan season will go beyond Saturday, because I don't think there's any doubt we think Michigan will beat New Mexico, but past that there's a lot of questions. It's again very interesting schedule where home away, and a good mix of teams as far as competition level. So I'm interested to see how it goes. Michigan made the playoff 3 straight years, of course, before taking a big step backward last season, but finished the year strong to give them some momentum. So yeah, we'll have this in written form up on MLive.com/Wolverines here later in the week, but you're hearing it first on the Wolverine Confidential podcast. Ryan Zook, let's start with you. What do you think for Michigan in 2025?
I have them finishing 9-3, falling just short of a playoff berth. Basically, where they are right now, 14th in a lot of the preseason polls. I think they're going to probably finish right around there too. The schedule is much easier and actually one of the easiest in the Big Ten this year as far as opponent wise, but a lot more road games and just a lot more uncertainty. I feel like there's going to be a few slip ups. There's going to be some really high moments, but also some lows, I think. So going 9-3.
Aaron McMahon, what do you say?
I'm in agreement with Ryan. I went through the schedule this morning and tried to isolate potential losses and just look at things. And I have 4 definite wins for them: New Mexico, CMU, Purdue, Northwestern. There's 4-0. I've got 4 games where they're likely to win, right? At Michigan State, at Maryland, Wisconsin, Washington. Let's say they go 3-1 there. So it puts you at 7-1. And then I've got 4 toss-up games: Oklahoma, at Nebraska, at Nebraska, at USC, and then home against Ohio State. And I'm going to just split them there just for argument's sake. So I have 9-3 as well. That the preseason win total 8.5 was about right. Look, Bryce Underwood could struggle. The offense could look, maybe not as bad as it did last year, but it could be a problem early, and it could trip Michigan up, or Michigan could potentially go to Oklahoma, win that game. Bryce Underwood could look really good, and Michigan, there's a pathway here for Michigan to potentially go 10-2 and 11-1. Now, I'm not betting that to happen. I don't think it's going to, but I'm going to take the middle roll here and say they go 9-3. I think they're just out of the Big Ten title picture. I think you're going to see some team, and we've said this before. I think the top part of the Big Ten is going to be a little bottlenecked. Right now, I think Penn State and Ohio State are the 2 best teams. And I think that 9-3 is going to put Michigan right on the cusp of the playoff picture. I say no. I have Illinois as the 4th Big Ten team getting in. But look, I think a 9-3 year, being in contention toward the end of the season for the Big Ten title and the playoff, I think is enough of a jump to get folks excited for the future, right? Like Sherrone Moore does need to he needs to step forward with this program, and I think a 9-3 year would do that, and it would be the I think the perfect first year for Bryce Underwood and Michigan to try and get more weapons in here, right? We were talking about Michigan recruiting very well. I think they need more help on the outside, and everything else. So now I'm Michigan go 9-3, just missing the playoff, and looking better than they did last year.
Well, if listeners came here to learn Michigan's football record for 2025, they're going to get it because it's 9-3. That's what I'm saying as well. And a lot of what Aaron said, you could just repeat from me as far as the breakdown of, what games I think they'll win, which games I think are toss-ups. I'm maybe a little more bullish on some of those, should win. I kind of maybe wrote those in ink instead of pencil for wins, but maybe less so about those toss-ups. They could go. I guess what I'm saying is I've got them at 9-3, but I'm if I had to pick my second guess, it'd be 8-4, not 10-2. That game at Oklahoma, at Nebraska, at USC, and even Ohio State, of course, at home at the end of the year. Yeah, you could lose all of those, or maybe three of them, and then you just get tripped up somewhere else along the way. That's all it takes is one more to drop you to 4 losses. So, and I don't think they make the playoff either. I don't think they're winning the Big Ten this year. But if they do that and Bryce Underwood looks good, that's a successful season. I mean, so much hinges on how he looks as the quarterback to get you excited for next year. Because if it's, you could go 9-3 a few different ways. I mean, last year, they went 8-5, but you saw nothing from the quarterback situation, so you knew something needed to change there. If it's a similar team that's just relying so much on its defense and the run game, that would be a little reason for less optimism heading into 2026. But all of us have 9-3 in Michigan missing the playoff in 2025.
So basically, Michigan's guaranteed to not go 9-3 now. If MLive all thinks that, then no, I'm just kidding. That's what makes it fun, though. You got to make season predictions.
There's a large range here, and I think I said a minute ago, like that. I wouldn't shock me if they went 7-5, and it's possible they go 10-2 or 11-1. But I think the middle ground here is probably 8 or 9 wins. So I think the odds makers hit the nail on the head with 8.5. 8-9, 8-4, 9-3 are probably the most likely scenarios here. Look, the road schedule is, to me, is the most concerning, right? Like, you got to go to Oklahoma, you open Big Ten play at Nebraska, you have to cross the country to go to USC. And look, USC isn't anything great, but we saw what Michigan, they struggled last year at Washington, and Washington wasn't anything great either. So, 9-3 just makes the most sense to me. Like, Michigan, you have to put into context here. Michigan went 7-5 in the regular season last year with one of the worst passing offenses in the country. And if you'd gotten just measurably better there, they easily could have went 8-4, 9-3. Now, I know it's a different year, different teams, different situations, and everything else, but I do think at the end of the day, the quarterback situation matters more than anything. And Michigan certainly has upgraded there. It's just a matter of how much and what Bryce Underwood looks like in year one. If he can just be average, middle of the road of the Big Ten, and Michigan get more production on the passing game, it opens things up, and I think it makes the offense considerably better, and it's going to put their defense in better situations, and I think it's going to, at the end of the day, result in more wins. And I think you'll have Michigan, in the playoff conversation. We'll probably be discussing whether they deserve to be in it at the end of the year or not, depending on where those marquee wins are or not. But look, at the end of the year, I think you're going to see the fan base more engaged as the season goes on, because games are still going to matter toward the end. And I think Michigan's going to be just a more competitive team, and be more fun to watch. When the quarterback is the best player on the team, and there's potential Bryce Underwood is that, I don't know, it makes things more entertaining, and just you're more likely to tune in and pay attention.
All right, Michigan, New Mexico, Saturday night in the season opener. Next time you hear from us will be after that game. Most by Monday morning, you should be new episode of Wolverine Confidential recapping that game and starting to look ahead to Oklahoma. But in the meantime, plenty of content coming on MLive.com/Wolverines. Thanks for listening.